coalition for Southwark, and we have Prem Goyal for the All People's Party, and we have Anil Al-Samarai from the Liberal Democrats, and of course last but certainly foremost, the incumbent Peter John, the leader of the London Borough of Southwark. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give them each up to 20 minutes to have a little discussion. I don't think they're all going to take 20 minutes. And then we'll let their young representatives or their youth side of their parties make some representations, and there'll be questions to those youth. And then after those questions, we'll open it up to the floor and hopefully have a nice, clean, lively debate. And the first person to go up is the incumbent, the leader, Peter John.
Just by way of introduction, my name's Peter John. I've been leader of the council in Southwark since May 2010. It's been the greatest privilege to hold this position. I come from Weston-super-Mare, which is in the West Country, and I'm the son of a teacher and a housewife. I grew up in a household where we didn't have a lot of money, but where we had clear ambition and the opportunity, I guess, to pursue that ambition. I went to the local comprehensive school, and at the age of about 11 or 12, I decided I wanted to be a lawyer, a barrister. There was no one in the family who did that kind of work or job. I had no connections, but I pursued my ambition, my dream, and I was delighted when I got to university in London in 1985, even more delighted when I became a pupil barrister in 1989 and became a barrister as I have been since 1990. And why am I telling you that? Well, because in short, it's my story from a background where, as I say, we didn't have a lot of money. When I went to the local comprehensive school, is the kind of story that I want every Southwark youngster to be able to fulfil. If they have a dream or ambition, that they have the opportunity to achieve that dream or ambition. And I hope that what we've done over the last 4 years and what a Labour Council will do over the next 4 years will enable even more youngsters to pursue their dreams and achieve their ambitions. The choice, I think, at these elections is between a Labour Party, which has demonstrated over the past 4 years that it can deliver and will deliver on commitments and pledges which it makes to the electorate, and other parties which, both nationally and locally, don't have that record of delivering on their pledges. Over the last 4 years in Southwark, I think, as a Labour Council, we've brought real and positive direction to the council and to the borough. From housing to public health, from free school meals to adult social care, from responding to the riots in 2011 to helping the next generation into the world of higher education and work. We've not been afraid as a council to take the big decisions, tackle the big issues, both for today and for the long term. And I think in what we've done, we've brought an end to what we described was the dither and delay of the previous administration in our borough. And we brought a real sense of purpose to Southwark, even in the face of unprecedented cuts to our budget. And I do think you have to remember that at all times. There has never been a council in Southwark which has had to deal with losing over a quarter of its budget. And that's happened to us over the past 4 years. We, as a council, are very proud, as I say, of our record. And I hope that the residents of our borough on May 22nd will renew their confidence in us. As part of the Labour Party in Southwark, I want to continue to create a borough which is proud of its growing role and reputation in central London, which creates the homes and the jobs and the opportunities for all of our residents, and where you can wander through Southwark without knowing if you're on a council estate or a private development, where quality affordable childcare is readily available, whether you're working 9 to 5 or whether you need more flexible support, where young people leave school and college in our borough with the qualifications which they need for the jobs which are coming to our borough, and where our libraries and leisure centres are open and free to all, and where you can live an active and healthy life and remain in your home for longer with support from your community and your council. Those aren't aspirations for another time. those are real and deliverable objectives over the next 4 years if you re-elect a Labour council?
As a young member of the Labour Party, I often ask myself, why politics, why Labour? And for me, being involved in politics, let's be frank, it's not the coolest thing to do. It's about as cool as, wearing your school uniform on a Saturday. And I grew up in Peckham, not too far from here, in the North Peckham estate. And back then I didn't realise how much politics was, all around me and the effect it actually had on my life. And for me, secondary school was the first taste I had of politics. I was elected as a class captain. I was fortunate enough to be elected as a class captain. And I was able to see some of the discussions that were made. And to be honest, some of the changes did go over my head, but I was able to be party to those discussions. Years later, I will be the first to admit, politics, sometimes it seems like it's a closed affair, often for the elite. On the complex issues like the economy, the political parties often seem similar. But for me, and this is a crucial question, as I approach the voting booth, I ask myself, on the key issues, on the key decisions, who's on my side and who's on my neighbour's side? And time and again, that answer is Labour. I recently received a letter from the Students' Loan Company, just to give me an update on how much my balance was. And after taking a massive gulp, I briefly reflected on my concerns going into uni as to how much debt I would be taking on. I can only imagine how much, what concerns young people have going into uni now, with having the possibility of taking on debts the size of mortgages. And that's why I was excited to see Southwark Labour committed to give more young people scholarships to go uni.
Thanks, Peter. My name's April Ashley. I'm the election agent for the Trade Unionist and Socialist Coalition in Southwark, and I'm a trade unionist myself, and I do work for the council, so I'm actually not a candidate here. But the Trade Unionist and Socialist Coalition, what are we, who are we? I think people want to know, because I think the last speaker said that all the three parties, all those voting Labour, all the three parties seem very similar. And we, the Trade Unionists and Socialist Coalition, we do think we are different. The TUSC was set up in 2010 and nationally to really campaign against the cuts and to fight the Tory cuts. One of our main leading proponents, main leading people who set up TUSC is the late Bob Crow, the RMT leader. And RMT is an official official sponsor of TUSC and on the national committee. And many trade unionists, socialists, anti-cuts campaigners are part of TUSC. We've got firefighters, teachers, civil servants are in TUSC, and hundreds of us have stood in local council elections. And we do feel we have to stand, because unfortunately Labour, who are supposed to represent working people, are not representing working people and are implementing the cuts. And we stand for opposition to all cuts in jobs, services, pay and conditions. Peter talked about the achievements he feels that Labour has done. But what Labour has done is axed 500 posts in the council over the last few years. That's sort of what they've done. So, where these jobs the youth are going to have. They have put people, as I said, through the court for non-payment of the council tax and implemented the bedroom tax, where people could be evicted for that. Since 2010, we have posts have been lost, as well as compulsory redundancies. Labour unfortunately tried to close down the local nurseries in Southwark, even though they say there's affordable nurseries in Southwark. They tried to close down the nurseries, and we had to fight to keep that open. And so when the parents fought to stop the nurseries closed down, they turned around and taxed the workforce and cut their conditions of service and cut their wages, because parents fought against the closure of those nurseries. So, they've really slashed away. They've also slashed wages of the poorest some of our poorest workers in the council. We have black women workers who they've slashed the wages for in the PSA service. Well, I was part of the campaign, so you did slash the wages of the black women workers, the people support assistance, and I was part of that campaign and tried to slash it by 40%, but in the end they slashed it by 15%. But these are the poorest women workers in the council. Now the council says, they're going to be building more council houses, but unfortunately what they've also done is that where the private developers in Banksides and areas like that, they're supposed to be building 35% of social housing. Unfortunately, the council has been bribed. The council has been bribed, and instead of building social housing in those prime areas, they pay the council, so they're not built in those areas. So we do feel that's a form of social and ethnic cleansing in those areas.
But they're local representatives there to fight for our interests, and that means they should go to the government and demand more money. And it can be done because it's been done before. It was done in Liverpool in the 1980s when there were cuts made by Thatcher in every other council, but our predecessor organisation won tens of millions of pounds for Liverpool Council, built thousands of houses and created thousands of jobs because we stood as fighting socialists rather than accepting the dictates of the government and big business. They could also stop the bedroom tax being implemented in the borough because they could redesignate so-called spare bedrooms as offices or whatever, and thus make the rooms exempt. That wouldn't cost them a penny, and yet they've still failed to do it because Labour and the other establishment parties would rather do what big business and the government tell them to. In addition to that, they could bring in rent control and stop landlords ripping us off by implementing a compulsory register of all landlords, and then they can determine on what terms landlords go on the register, which means they can bring in rent control. If you want a council which stands up for ordinary people and protects services, creates jobs, increases wages, then vote Trade Unionist and Socialist Coalition. If you want more misery, more unemployment, more low pay, vote Labour. Thank you.
My name's Anoud Al-Samurai. I am the leader of the Liberal Democrat Council group in Southwark. We have 25 councillors across the borough at the moment. I thought I would start by saying a little bit about myself as well, because I think it is helpful to understand that politicians are real people, or at least we hope we are. My father was Iraqi, my mother's British from Camberwell, and we lived until I was 10 years old in Kuwait. Went to Duckenham Hill Primary School, then went to secondary school in Lewisham, because frankly the schools in Southwark were so appalling in those days. And one thing, and credit to everyone who's been involved in education in Southwark, but it has improved massively in those years. I suppose that I was particularly interested in how you can help your community and get involved, but not necessarily having come from a background where there was a very strict state telling people how to live their lives. Actually, for me, I rebelled against that, frankly. I wanted people to have control over their own lives. And naturally, I might have been somebody who went to the Labour Party, a bit like Johnson. I had those thoughts as well. But actually, for me, being a Liberal is really importantly about making sure people have a fair chance and an opportunity, but that they also have responsibility for their own lives and their own decisions. And that's a very fundamental way I try to empower residents in my ward, but also try to talk, when I talk to council officers and housing officers, about actually giving people real decisions about what happens in their life. I think otherwise you actually do end up feeling very disenfranchised, and what's the point of voting? And so there is a point in voting, but it's not, democracy isn't just about voting, it's actually about having control about how money is spent in your community and the decisions which are made there. I studied politics at university. I went to state school and was one of the first kids from my school to get into Oxford. I don't often actually talk about my university education because it's not always very cool to have been to Oxford. But actually I'm very proud that I was able to do that, and I was only able to do that because My parents believed in education, and my grandma paid my tuition fees for me, and they scrimped and scraped, and I worked every holiday to make it work. And absolutely, if I didn't have those parents and my grandma pushing me, I wouldn't have got there. So I think anything we can do to support young people with education, we must do. Because it means I got to the position I'm in today, which is standing here before you. The Liberal Democrat manifesto for Southwark is very simple. It's homes, it's jobs, it's kids, and it's a council tax cut. And we've kept it simple because actually it's about what's important. One of the reasons homes is very important to me is when we came to England, we were very overcrowded. We also were uncertain of where we were going to live, and I just know how much that affects a family and the pressure that being overcrowded put on my parents. They eventually divorced, and that was a big part of it. One of the things that makes me the most cross about what Labour has done over the last 4 years in Southwark is they've completely sold us out on housing. Not only have they sold off council homes, and that's not just through right to buy, it's auctioning off any council home because it's worth over 300,000. Not only have they sold off council homes, but they're also not getting new affordable homes in new developments. Now we hear them talk about building some figure when they've decided on it in 25 or 30 years, but actually that doesn't help anybody now. And it doesn't help anybody now when we're seeing new developments happen that are 100% private, often marketed abroad in places like Malaysia and Hong Kong to foreign investors as a safe place to put your money, not even somewhere to live. Absolutely. So actually, I think that it is scandalous that we are allowing development at the Elephant and Castle where there were 1,200 flats at the Haygate, council flats, 1,200. We're getting 79 at council rents. That is disgusting. Peter should be ashamed of himself, and he should be ashamed of standing up here in front of you talking about building council homes. The other thing on housing that's really important to get right is the basic housing repairs. I was at a constituent this afternoon who was showing me the damp in his home. Council flats in Southwark are not warm, dry and safe. They are damp and they are unsafe. There are blocks where I have had to plead to get door entry systems put in, blocks where we've had to get the council to do, we've done our own survey to look into damp, and where people are still getting missed appointments and housing officers not coming when they say they will. So we're not getting the basic housing repairs right, and I think it's offensive to the people who are my constituent in Presswood House this afternoon who's struggling with that. So just in conclusion, and to remind you, it's about homes, it's about kids, it's about jobs, and it's about a council tax cut. It's not about getting the basics wrong on things like housing repairs, rolling over to developers, and wasting money on things that we can well do without. Thank you.
How have Labour rewarded minority voters? In return, Labour only gives one of their 12 top leadership positions in Southwark to a talented minority, and that is just 8% of the top leadership positions. In exchange rate terms, for every pound we give to Labour, we only get back about 45 Nara, not 270 Nara. 1,200 SLL, not 7,400 SLL. 16 pence, not 100 pence for 1 pound. Furthermore, out of 657,000 pounds paid to our top 13 political leaders, 12 from Labour, 1 from Lib Dem, 612,000 pounds goes to the top 12 indigenous politicians and just 45,000 pounds to a minority leader, and that is 7 cents out of every pound. Is this not inequality? This is unacceptable. This is unfair, and this is exploitation.
Absolutely.
As a result, our top politicians do not reflect our community, do not understand our journey, and do not want to recognize our talent. Southwark is dividing.
Absolutely.
Let me share a recent example of 2 community events I attended. For Southwark's Armed Forces Day, an event attended by 2,000 people, 95% of whom were indigenous, The council contributed £46,000, that is £23 per person. And 15 plus Labour councillors joined the celebration. And I'm happy about that. But for Southwark's Eid festival, an event attended by 5,000 people, 99% of were minority, the council contributed £0 per person, and not even one Labour political leader joined the celebration. Is this not inequality?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it gets worse. On the issues most affecting our residents, Labour gives us no value for money. They would rather take a £1,600 Olympic opening ticket from property developer land lease instead of providing sustainable solution on housing. The journey of our community champion has never been one of shortcuts or settling for less. We know hopelessness, but we also know hope. Our hope will only become a reality when our leaders' journey and experiences speak to those of our residents. When we tap the talent of all residents, and when we exercise our voting power to change the status quo. That is why APP is the alternative in Southwark.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Southwark Leaders Debate. I'd like to thank Nicholas and team for organizing this first Southwark local political hustings in living memory. Ladies and gentlemen, I've lived in Peckham for over 2 decades. I've been a youth leader, and since the age of 13, I've been instrumental in saving what's now known as the Damilo Taylor Center, which the council tried to close on the Labour administration. During our time, white people coming from all over the borough, a delegation of 70 Somalians from the Elephant and Castle, white people from East Dulwich like Lawrence and Ansumana, which you know, our gang leader over there. I had people like Marcus, Craig from the Goldsmith Estate, and people like Kevin Anderson from North Peckham Estate. During that time, we had only one mentor that we look up to. His name was Edward James. Edward always encouraged us as young people not to only play football, but also to do our academic studies within the DTC. And also, he had his music business, which also brought it to the center for those who express an interest in the music industry. In my first semester at university, when I came back, I met a lot of these boys sitting outside the center and asked them, what has gone wrong? They said they were kicked out. The reason for this is because there's a lack of leadership within the community. And not only that, 2 of those guys who are my friends are in prison. One of them is Yusuf, which you're mentoring now in the Peckham's Gangs project. There are 2 fundamental issues that is affecting our youth in our community today, which I'm about to talk about. One of them is youth unemployment, especially amongst ethnic minority people. And number 2, there is no role models where the tough decisions are made within the council. The House of Commons Library report, the Department of Works and Pensions, and the Operation Black Vote report that was published earlier this year shows that the higher joblessness rates that's within our community is 45% as opposed to a white counterpart, which is 19%. Ladies and gentlemen, the evidence itself is self-evident. Every young person of working age, graduates and non-graduates, I've come across during this campaign process are telling me that they haven't got a job. It is our commitment that we intend to bring about 1,000 apprenticeships, working with our business partners and service partners within the council. The reason why these people cannot associate with our labour politicians is because they detach from the community. The second indicator is crime and unemployment. Our criminal justice system is very good at punishing people, but very bad at rehabilitation. This also has economic ramification on the welfare state system. When a young man commits a crime by commission or omission, what normally happens is that they have to pay money back into the system. And the only way they can pay that money is through the benefit system. And as a result of that, they cannot get a job because they have to be CRB checked. So this is why the government has to review the CRB system, now known as disclosures and barring. And as a result of that, Jason Keto Edwards, who's another leader in the community, and myself have been working with the Secretary of State, Chris Grayling, on this issue that you cannot get a job because of the CRB check. And as a result, they're trying to bring education within the prison service, you know, but even that, you can bring education in the prison service, but if you don't remove the disclosure and barring, you still cannot get a job. This is affecting our young black men within the community.